Hey everyone, it's Professor Ellis. I want to welcome you to week 6 of Technical Writing, English 2575, Fall 2021. This is for sections OL 68 and OL 70. I hope everybody's doing well. They're staying healthy. That obviously by now you should all have been vaccinated. Continue to mask up, maintain social distance when you can. Eat healthy, get plenty of rest, do everything you can to keep yourself healthy. And able to stay on point, not just for our class, but obviously for your other classes, your work, for your life, taking care of your families, everything. Because we're all in it to win it, right? You want to do everything you can to make sure that you're going to be able to sustain yourself, sustain your work, sustain your participation in the class, to see this thing through to the end of the semester with the grade that you want and a whole selection of deliverables that you're going to be able to show off what you know how to do whenever you're applying for jobs and showing off your communication skills through your e-portfolio, your LinkedIn.com profile, etc. So keep your eye on the prize in that regard and do everything that you can to get yourself to cross the finish line at the end. So before we get started, just want to remind you also, reach out to me if you have any questions or anything comes up in regards to your work in the class. If you have to turn things in late, any of that stuff. You can email me, jellis@citytech.cuny.edu, or you can come to my office hours on Wednesdays between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. on Google Hangouts. The link is on the left-hand side of our Open Lab site and at the very top of the syllabus. So make sure that you are you're taking advantage of that because I'm here to support you. But if I don't know what kind of help you need in addition to the lectures and the writing that I provide on Open Lab or the emails that I send to the class, you have to let me know what that is so that I can do whatever is humanly possible to make sure that you're successful in the class. This is something that we have to work together on. But that's why I keep harping about how to contact me because I don't want anybody in the class to suffer in silence. Let me know what I can do to help you out. I know already that we've had a couple students in class you've had to withdraw for whatever reasons. If it comes down to you feel that you need to do that, talk to me first. Obviously, if it's something like really big going on, there might not be anything we can do. But if it's something that we might be able to work together on, I want you to know that I'm here to support you in whatever way that I can as far as the class is concerned. So, let's take a look at what we got going on this week. Because as with last week's lecture, I want to try to keep this short and give you as much time as possible to be doing the work. But there are a lot of things we have to cover, so we'll see how it goes. So first, just a quick review for last week. In last week's lecture, we talked about writing the second half of your expanded definition project. That's the context and working definition section, and of course you have your references at the end of the document. And then for the weekly writing assignment, you were going to post just those two parts with whatever relevant references you had for the context section into a comment on the week 5 weekly writing assignment. That was just a way of showing me like you're moving ahead, you're doing the work in the class. And again, those things are just graded on best effort. You turn it in, you're going to get 100% of the credit. I don't nickel and dime you when it comes to the weekly writing assignment. That is writing practice, and it's also meant to help support your overall progression in the class on the major projects. So that brings us to this week's class. We're going to be doing peer review on the expanded definition project. We're going to introduce the next major project, the 1500 to 2000 word instruction manual or training manual, and then we're going to discuss homework. The homework is going to be the peer review, and then the weekly writing assignment is going to be a brainstorming memo in which you discuss 3 possible topics for your instruction manual and then tell me which one you decided to select and why. So that memo will be about 250 words long, one page, double spaced. But regular writing practice, but it's going to be cognitive work where you're going to be deliberating about what possible topic you select for your instruction manual. So let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so for doing peer review on the expanded definition project, what we need to do is assemble what you've worked on for the first half of the project and the second half into a single document. You've probably already been doing this whenever you've been writing the expanded definition project and just copying and pasting the correct part into the weekly writing assignment, which that's been totally fine for you to do that. If you have been writing it in two separate documents, what I would suggest now is you create a new document that you'll want to paste the first half into the top and then the second half into the bottom, right? Now, I'll give you as a reminder for this, on this week's lecture, this document which you've already seen before, but this will be what your expanded definition project looks like in memo format, to, from, date, subject. You're going to have one section for introduction, a section for definitions, a section for context. We're going to skip down past my examples, the section for working definition, and then your references. And again, remember all your quotes that you include in your writing from other sources need to be quoted, as I say, quote, and you're going to be using IEEE citations, which means that each quote is numerically numbered 1, 2, 3, 4 in the order that they appear in your memo. And those numbers will correspond 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. in your references section at the bottom of your document. So your first quote will be 1, your second quote above will be 2, third quote above is 3, etc. So make sure that they are in order, numbered in order correctly when you assemble the two halves of your expanded definition project. After you've done that, I want you to read it over. And one thing I didn't mention before you did peer review on the 500-word summary project, which I'm still grading right now. But before we did peer review on that, I didn't suggest that you read your work aloud. But that's something that you ought to do before you send around your expanded definition project to your team for peer review. Read it aloud. And I guarantee you, when you read your work aloud, you yourself will find mistakes. You will think of different ways to word things to be clearer, to be grammatically correct, to express your ideas better than if you are reading things to yourself silently. One of the things about reading things aloud is it slows the brain down so that we don't skip over unconsciously mistakes that we make. When you read something silently, it's actually really easy to skip over a mistake and you don't even realize it. But by slowing down, by reading it aloud, just like you're reading a storybook to someone, but you're just reading it to yourself, you will find so much that you can improve in your writing, not only in this, but in any writing that you do, even an email that you're going to send to a professor. Take the time to read it aloud real quickly, and you're going to think of something that you ought to change to make it better before you send it off. And the same is true with a document like this. So the first thing I want you to do is, after you've put this into a single document, read through it aloud and make any corrections that you can at that stage. Of course, also use spelling check. If your word processor has a grammar check, you run that as well. Fix as many easy problems as you can before you send it to peer review. Then, this Wednesday, I'm going to send a new reply all email to your team that's going to be for peer review on the expanded definition project. And the thing about peer review on this is, I know that some folks may be a little behind, they may be catching up. For those of you that are caught up, go ahead and reply all, make your ask and offer, and let people know that you are looking for feedback on your writing, and you will return it in kind when you receive their writing. For those of you that are catching up, you should go ahead when you receive that email from your teammates, read their work, reply all, and send out your feedback to them. And then just make a note when you reply to them, I'm still catching up on my project. I will send it out to the team as soon as possible. Or if you can give a date and time, let them know that. But now, another thing to keep in mind within the team is that you all have different schedules, and you can't always expect, if you send out your work late to the team, that they're going to be able to reply to your ask like that, okay? If someone in your team says they only can work on Saturdays, for example, well, if you send your work out on Sunday, that means you're not going to hear from them again until Saturday. So you do have to kind of take that into consideration whenever you are asking for this feedback on peer review. And it's also going to be true when you're working on the team projects in later the semester. Well, with all that being said, I don't want anybody to be too stressed out about completing peer review and then getting their work turned in the week after next. What we're going to do is peer review this week, and then in our next lecture, week 7, I'll explain how to submit your expanded definition project for a grade. And then you'll have a whole week to do that. So if we're doing peer review this week, peer review ought to be done by Wednesday the 20th, ideally. And then I'll explain next week how to turn in your project by October 27th. But what this means is we actually have a little bit of wiggle room for completing peer review over between now and August. I'm thinking in the past, October 26th, because that would mean you can get your feedback by October 26th, revise your work that night, and then get it turned in on the 27th. If some folks might even need more time than that, you need to be reaching out to me via email closer to the 27th, letting me know what's going on. And then, of course, following that email up with another email to tell me when you actually do submit your work. But hopefully we can get as many folks in the two sections turned in and done with this thing by October 27th, because the goal is to keep moving forward and not falling behind, because obviously we do have some extra time occasionally to get things done, but whenever you fall behind, that you can double your workload essentially with trying to catch up. Let's just look at the syllabus real quick. Going down, week 7. Yeah, Wednesday, October 20th, that's next week, week 7. Post-expanded definition to open lab. I'll be explaining how to do that, which means that your expanded definition will be due by Wednesday, October 27th. So yeah, we're doing okay. And then we're going to be moving ahead with the instruction manual this week to let you go ahead and begin thinking about that and beginning that project. All right, so again, Wednesday this week, I'll post this lecture, but watch for that reply all email. And again, each team should be figuring out other ways that you can communicate. But for these peer review exercises, I do want you to use email and reply all so that I can see the work that you're doing together and be able to give everybody credit whenever you are participating in peer review, because that goes into your participation grade in the class. So make sure you're always clicking reply all for these peer review emails. And then you can rely on your other means of communication, text messaging, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, whatever, as a back channel for you to check in on people and have any other conversations about peer review or just anything involving the class that you want to. Okay, email is for just the straight peer review, so I can see what's going on. All right, so that's that. And so that's going to be the homework for this week, is the peer review on your draft 750 to 1,000 word expanded definition project. And again, the things to be thinking about when you're peer reviewing someone else's work is, keep it polite, keep it professional. Remember, you're working with these people all semester. But at the same time, I want you to imagine yourself being responsible for that writing. Think if you had to turn in that other person's project as your own, what would you change about it to make it better? Because you, from your own perspective, are going to look at someone else's writing and think that there's a lot of things you would probably change about it. Give them some advice on that. And I'm not expecting you to spend like hours on this, but you do need to invest, an appropriate amount of time. Read through the work once, and then think about is anything missing? Is there anything that needs to be expanded on? Whenever you look at its length, does it seem too long? Does it seem too short? Let them know these kinds of things that you notice about their writing. And then, as before, I would like you to find some specific example in their writing, not anything they quoted, okay? Something they wrote in their own words, and quote that in your email to them, and give them a suggestion about how to rewrite that sentence the way you would say it, the way you would write it. That kind of help not only is beneficial for you because it's making you cognitively work with those words in a way that you normally only do with your own writing, but it's also beneficial to them to get a different perspective on how to write something in their professional expanded definition project from one of their teammates. And again, within the team, everybody should be replying to one another. Reply all. Everybody gives feedback to each other, and everybody should be receiving feedback from each other. As I mentioned at the beginning of class, only a couple of folks have withdrawn from the class, and so watch those reply all emails, because anyone that I know that has withdrawn, I will remove them from this new reply all email on the expanded definition project, so that you'll have a heads up that you might have lost a team member. But if everybody's name is attached to that email, well, you'll know that everybody is still safe in your team. All right, so watch for that Wednesday, and we'll try to get that done over this coming week if at all possible. But while you're doing peer review, let's begin turning our attention to the next project, which is the 1,500 to 2,000 word instruction manual or training manual. Now, the training manual is again an individual project. And if we look over at the syllabus, there's a write-up here about it. It's 20% of your grade. If I go back over to, I'm actually going to close this guy, I don't need it. It's an individual project. You will be peer reviewing it with your teammates, but the writing that goes into it should be your own. It can be supported by research that you do. And in the project, the goals are to demonstrate an ability to explain a task or a process in clear, concise language, meaning you show someone how to do something that requires steps, okay? That it demonstrates a selection and definition of appropriate terminology and concepts, meaning that whatever it is you're writing about, it needs to be appropriate for that particular field represented by the topic of your instruction manual. An awareness of the intended user and audience. So you want to be carefully thinking about, who is this instruction manual intended for? Is it for a general audience, like someone that may or may not have a college education? Is it someone in your field? Would it be like something for a technical piece of equipment? that the average user would never know about. So you're trying to customize your instruction manual for someone that knows a little bit about the field, or knows as much as you know in the field. And then knowledge of the instructional manual format. And we're going to be looking at some examples of this, and you should have already looked at some examples from the David McMurray online technical writing textbook that I linked to from last week and asked you to read the section on instructions and make some notes on that, so you would be prepared coming into this lecture already with an idea about what is involved in an instruction manual. Now, some parameters for your instruction manual that you should be aware of is that all diagrams, illustrations, and photos must be created by you and integrated into your manual. So I do make an allowance for screenshots that you create and that are annotated by yourself are permitted. So if you're writing an instruction manual about how to use a piece of software, you can make your own screenshots of the software on your computer desktop and create the images that create the sequence that you're trying to show your user how to do. But anything that you need to show something physical in the world, you need to take your own photographs, you can make your own drawings, your own illustrations. And the thing to keep in mind is that this is not an art project. I'm not going to grade you on how good an artist you are if you need to draw a diagram of, like, say, an integrated circuit. What I'll be looking at is it presenting the information that you discuss and write about in the instruction manual accurate. Does it convey what the user of the instruction manual needs to see in support of the steps that you're telling them to perform of whatever task you're instructing them how to do in your instruction manual? So this is something I want to stress, and I'm going to repeat in future lectures, because I've had a lot of students in the past, for whatever reason, they either don't listen to me on this or they don't quite wrap their mind around it. Because I do understand, like, it's very easy to obtain images online, some of which are copyrighted, others are public domain, some are available with Creative Commons licensing. But for the purposes of our project, I want you to be the intentional creator of all diagrams, illustrations, and photos, and your screenshots must be made by you as well if you incorporate those. You can't use those that someone else has made and made available online. You have to be the one that makes those, because the act of drawing something or taking a photo of something or screenshotting something is as expressive as the words that you write. And you need to be responsible for that and not dependent on what someone else has created in order to make something of your own, like this instruction manual. And of course, anybody has any questions about this, please ask me, email or my virtual office hours. I'll be glad to help you out. But I'll be showing you some examples of things that might generate some ideas for you. Now, any sources that you use have to be documented. So if you quote anything from, like, maybe another instruction manual or from an article or something you found online, it has to be documented according to APA format. You might be talking about creating an instruction manual for something made by, say, Apple or by Lenovo or Asus or whoever. And so there might be writing on a website or a web page that you want to incorporate into your instruction manual. You can do that as long as, again, you quote it, put it in quotation marks, you give it citation. And actually, I'm sorry, I just noticed that this says APA. Let me change that real quick. That should be IEEE. Here we go. There we go. So it needs to be documented according to IEEE format, right? That's what we're using on everything in the class. But now remember, anything that you quote, you need to write as much or more about what you're quoting to explain it, to explain why it's being included, why is it important, how is it relevant to your instruction manual. Now, what we'll talk about now is we'll look at a couple of examples. I'm going to show you a sample outline that I'm going to give you. I'm not going to go over it today, but I just want to mention it while it's up here on the screen, starting it in Google Docs. For this project, I want you to use Google Docs to write your instruction manual. Right now, in today's class and with this weekly writing assignment, we're not actually going to begin writing the instruction manual, so you don't have to do that yet. We can talk more about that next class in our next lecture, week 7. But just a heads up, we're going to be using Google Docs for your instruction manual because you're going to be using Google Docs to make your instruction manual available online so that you can link it to the post that you're going to make on OpenLab when you submit it. I want you to learn how to use some of these features of Google Docs because they may come in handy for you later on when you're in the workplace, so we can practice them on this project. So make sure, if you don't already have a Gmail account or a Google account, sign up for one, or if you don't want to use the account you have with our class, just sign up for a new account that's just for your username at CityTech or your name at CityTech, just for the express purposes of our project. All right, so let's take a look at a sample outline. And I'm going to give you a copy of this, okay? So I don't want anybody to freak out. Like, I know there's a lot of writing. It's kind of small in the window. There we go. So the way that I would suggest you organize your instruction manual is by using headings like I've listed here, and using a version numbering system to signify section and subsection of your instruction manual. As we look at different examples of instruction manuals, you'll see that this type of section numbering scheme can actually be beneficial whenever you want to create a table of contents later, because as you change your instruction manual, the pagination can change. And then you have to go back to your table of contents and correct things if you're not using like an automated table of contents creation tool. Whereas if you use this kind of numbering scheme, your table of contents will be very easy to create because you start with this list, copy it, and then paste it underneath, and then you fill out each section, and you already have a table of contents at the top, and you have all of your instruction manual material neatly organized using this numbering scheme. Now, the way the numbering scheme works is you have one, like a bigger part, that would be your 1.0 introduction, 2.0 description of the equipment, 3.0 list of materials and equipment needed, 4.0 the actual directions. And even within directions, you can break it down into smaller sections. 4.1 will be, like for this example, assemble the skateboard. 4.11, step 1. 4.12, step 2. 4.13, step 3, etc. A section 5 for troubleshooting. Section 6, maybe a glossary where you give definitions of the terms that you use in your instruction manual. Again, this glossary, you can be looking up definitions and citing them from Oxford English Dictionary, from Merriam-Webster Dictionary. You know how to do this already from the Expanded Definition Project. And then finally, section 7 will be your reference list. So I'm going to give you this as a guide, and you can incorporate this into your instruction manual, But also, based on the examples that you saw on the David McMurray online technical writing textbook website, there are other ways to do this. I don't want you to think that this is the only way and that I'll take points off if you don't do this. This is a good plan. It makes it simple. But there are other ways if you want to take a different tack for designing your organization for your instruction manual. Also, to just show you an example of like some of the ways that you can include photographs, like you can just put whatever it is that you're talking about in your instructions, like on your desk or in a place that's well lighted, and take a photo of it to illustrate what it is you're giving instructions on. Similarly, you can use even Google Docs, sheets, slides, forms, more. Google Drawings, a really cool tool that's built into Google Drive. Get rid of that. Oh, I guess I lost that file. So let me find that file again. Not that one. Here we go. So you can use Google Draw, as I've done here. Let me just zoom out just a little. So this was like a sample instruction manual that I made to show students of like how to use a camera, how to set up a camera for doing bokeh effect, where you have a background that is blurry, but a subject in front of the background that's in focus. And so I used Google Drawing to draw this very simple illustration of a background, and I labeled it with text in the drawing: background Christmas tree lights. Foreground, that's the portrait subject, the face and upper body of the person I was photographing. I just drew a simple illustration of what the camera looks like on a tripod, and then use this isometric design to give it depth, right? But this was just drawing by hand and using the built-in tools in Google Drawing to do. And I'm not an artist, so I'm not expecting you to be. But you can learn how to use these tools to get your idea across and incorporate these illustrations in your instruction manual. Additionally, you could also draw things by hand onto blank printer paper with a pencil or a pen or a magic marker. I mean, obviously using something like a magic marker pops more. It's easier to see, right? And then once you've done that, you can scan or photograph your drawing and then paste it into your instruction manual Google Doc. So we'll talk more about this in the coming weeks, but I just want to give you some ideas to begin thinking about what you can do to make your instruction manual get your idea across. Now, before we go into some of the examples to look at today, one of the important things I need to stress as well about the instruction manual is, well, first off, it needs to be something new. It can't be an instruction manual or process manual or any kind of instruction guide you might have created for another class. Because I know, like for some of the electrical engineering and computer science classes, students are tasked with creating instruction manuals for different projects that you work on. So it does need to be something unique and new that you created an instruction manual for before. Second, it needs to be an instruction manual that is relevant to what it is you're working on in your major and what your career is going to be about. Just as I've talked about before, about every deliverable in our class, you need to choose your topics so that it's always relevant to what it is you're interested in. So you're working on things that are engaging and are obviously useful to you to learn more about. and to be able to demonstrate what you've learned by creating these documents, but also that you can carry this document out of my class. I want it to be something that you can link to on your LinkedIn.com profile, or put in an e-portfolio, or give as a writing sample to show that you have communication skills that none of the other applicants for that job you really want will have. If you take the time to create really good deliverables in our class, you can carry them out of our class and use them whenever you're applying for these jobs as a way to show that you actually can do these things that your employer either wants you to do or may realize, hey, you add more value to their company because you know how to do these things. So again, try to make this as useful as possible and relevant as possible by choosing a scientific or technical topic for your instruction manual that's relevant to what you're learning in school and what you plan to be doing in your career. All right? So let's look at a couple of examples just to think about instruction manuals in general. So my favorite type of instruction manual are Lego building instructions. This is the brand new Lego Tumbler that was released this year. It's an updated model from the one that they released when The Dark Knight originally was released. But as we look through this instruction manual, I begin to see an absence of words. I mean, here's some like words for check for compatibility. Lego.com/device check. And so here you see like a smartphone being used by a Lego minifigure that must have some relevance for the building instructions. I guess it has something to do with being able to use or look at building instructions with your smartphone, in addition to being able to see your instructions inside the printed book that comes with your Lego set. But if I look a little bit further down, I can see that they've divided the instructions amongst individual bags that you will find inside the boxed Lego set. So bag 1 gives you Lego, the Batman Lego minifigure and the chassis for the Tumbler. Bag number 2 gives you Scarecrow and a little bit more of the Tumbler construction. Bag 3, you get to build the back and the top canopy. And then finally with bag 4, I can see we have the wheels attached and the side arms that support the front wheels. And now we're seeing just this part, bag 1's where they want us to start, I think. And then they break down how things to go together. You see one piece, arrow goes down. Second piece, arrow goes down through the cape to the fourth piece, and then the fifth piece. And then that leads to an arrow that shows us the completed Batman. We see that he's holding that Batarang. Well, there it is, and there's an arrow guiding us to where that goes. Here we see his bat hook gun being assembled. How that goes together. Again, arrows, and we have numerals now. Step 1, step 2. And then an arrow showing where that goes into his left hand. Shows different ways to use different minifigure heads for different effect of what Batman looks like. And then we get to the steps where we're actually building the Tumbler. Step 1 uses these parts, this equipment, and you do this with it. That piece here goes down with these arrows so that those studs there are on top of those studs. Step 2, we got a new part, this 6x2 plate, and it shows here where it goes in this assemblage, for lack of a better word. Then we get to step 3. We got this really big ass piece here, and we see that it goes here with this many studs sticking out from this assemblage. And it keeps building up, but what we can observe is that there's no words in any of this. We have numerals to show us the steps. We do see that there are page numbers in the lower corners of each page. It does give us some helpful symbols to show us when we need to turn something over, when to turn something back over. Arrows are very important to guiding us where things go, but sometimes it's more like hidden pictures where we see what something looks like before, and then we have to see how something looks like afterwards if we get two new pieces to add. And so we have to hunt around to where those things go in the middle because we can see they weren't there in the previous step. So Lego does a lot of neat things that are very visually oriented, that don't use a lot or if any words to convey that. In large part, their audience they have children that are obviously building Lego. Some of them may have minimal language skills, but also Lego is sold around the world. So Lego is thinking, is it cheaper for us to produce a different instruction manual for every language on earth where we of buyers that buy our Lego sets? Or can we streamline it and produce one instruction manual that everybody gets because language doesn't become a barrier? And I think that they've largely opted to do that. And now, with many more adults getting into Lego, because this system works, there's no real need to add a lot of words, except I will say, like in the more adult-oriented large piece sets, they usually do include booklets that include more writing, like background on how the model was designed, who designed it, what was its inspiration, that you don't find in the lower cost sets like this that are primarily intended for like a younger audience. Similarly, if we think about IKEA again is producing things that are sold all around the world, produced out of Sweden, but they're not using words. Everything is these pictograms. This figure is talking, but he's really showing us what he wants us to have. A flathead screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, and a hammer. Showing that one person can't do this alone, you need two people. If you have questions, well, you can, there's a phone line is connected to IKEA, you can call their tech support. Everything is diagrammed, shows you how many in numerals you need of each piece of equipment in the construction of this, which is a desk. Again, just like the Lego, they break it down with like laying out the parts and showing you with lines where things go. And they show close-ups for just one of those about how it works, and then you can extrapolate, oh, that's the way you attach all of these guys. Showing you what something looks like correctly, what something doesn't look correct. How to turn something up and then attach the next piece. Using numerals for steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. Even showing you how to hold something as you're assembling it. Again, all of this is very visually oriented to avoid the necessity of using words to explain things. But now let me show you another example. Here is an instruction manual for an Asus motherboard for AMD processors. And the thing about a computer motherboard is a very complex piece of equipment. It's essentially what ties everything together in your computer. Your CPU, memory, drives, power supply, everything plugs into that motherboard, and it's what ties it all together. And so you can imagine for a computer that is a very complex piece of equipment. And I don't think, you can prove me wrong, but I don't think that there are any instruction manuals for computer motherboards that are just visually oriented, like an IKEA manual or a Lego manual, that they are going to have a lot of writing. And you can also see there's there's even a table of contents, which we don't really see in the Lego manual or the IKEA manual. And this is organized around, introducing the product, basic installation, more advanced topics like, BIOS settings and RAID support for RAID array. And then there's an appendix, notices. These would be like, notices for like different standards and warnings that need to be included, how to contact them. And then we get into the actual guide itself. But now notice that there are some visual elements here. Like they're showing us this symbol means caution. This pointing finger symbol means important. This quill writing something means note, like you should pay attention to it. You can see that they use tables to list out all the specifications for the motherboard. It shows what kind of CPUs it supports, what is the specific chipset of the motherboard, what memory types are supported, what types of graphics are supported, and which types of CPUs offer onboard graphics. What type of expansion slots, multi-GPU support or not, depending on the motherboard. All of this is laid out as a table to make the information easy for someone to be able to note the type of technical specification and what are the details. What does this table look like? Does anybody remember how I showed you the Cornell method of note-taking? It looks just like this. You have big topics, keywords on the left, you have the details on the right. This table is basically cribbing from the Cornell note-taking method because it's a great way to show information. You have the umbrella term on the left, all the details on the right. Now we have a diagram for the motherboard, and the diagram shows labels for all the different parts, the CPU socket, the memory sockets, power connectors. We see these diagram labels, A, are pointing to this information here about the PCI bus connectors. We see B, we have B listed here, which shows the different types of like M.2 storage connector, and then here we have the serial ATA connectors. Then finally we get to package contents. This will be like what's in the box for the motherboard. We got the motherboard, we got different cables, miscellaneous things, installation media, support DVD, and documentation. The user manual that we're reading right now, but it would be the printed form. Installation tools and components. Now it's showing us all the different things we need to assemble a computer using this motherboard. Now, obviously Asus is giving us the motherboard. We bought that box from them. It includes a motherboard inside. But it's also saying you got to get all this other stuff too. Case, power supply, you need a screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, you need a cooler, you need a CPU, you need memory, you need different types of drives, you need a graphics card depending on the CPU you're using. You might need an M.2 memory module, and then you have the bag of screws that comes with the motherboard. Gives you some cautions. We have the caution symbol that we need to be aware of, like static discharge and other things. Making sure that the power supply is unplugged. I mean, these things you would think maybe shouldn't need to be said, but they put them there just in case, both to lower their liability, but also just as a precaution for someone who might not know those things. Because you have to imagine with an instruction manual, you need to provide as much information for as wide a variety of people that might be using your instruction manual as possible. You have to imagine who are your users, who might use this instruction manual. While you might have an ideal user in mind, you need to be thinking on either side of that ideal user, both in terms of more advanced as well as less advanced, and accommodate them, because you want your instruction manual to be able to stand on its own to help users do whatever task it is that you're assigning them to do. So let's look at another example. This is a digital multimeter. And you can see with this, unlike the motherboard manual, which is actually, let's see how many pages, like 64 pages long. This multimeter manual, on the other hand, is only 2 pages long. I mean, it's a very complex piece of equipment for your testing electrical sources, but a couple of things are going on. With a digital multimeter, I would suspect that they're thinking of like their user as someone who already has a certain amount of knowledge about electricity and electrical instrumentation like a multimeter. They need to give people information about how to use this specific multimeter, but not necessarily need to go into all of the details about how it works or how to use it specifically. Because someone that has this kind of training likely has already used a type of a multimeter before. Maybe not this specific one, but if they have a basic understanding of how multimeters work, then they will be able to use this very brief manual in order to use it the way it's intended for someone that would need to be using a multimeter in general. Whereas with this manual for the computer motherboard, Asus is imagining a number of different users for this manual. You're going to have experienced people that have built computers before, but you're also going to have some users that may not have built a computer before. They might have a general understanding of how, what a computer entails, like all the parts that go into it, but they may not have actually put it together piece by piece. And so you can find here, they go to a lot of detail showing how to connect everything up, including a water-cooled or liquid-cooled system, in addition to how to use a fan-based assembly for cooling the CPU. So they go over a lot of different options with the hope that they can help their users that are buying this motherboard, whether it be an experienced user or a first-time computer builder, that can make use of their product. So again, you think about who your user is and try to accommodate them and accommodate users within a range, not just that very specific case that you might have in mind. Also, in addition, I'm going to give you links to all of these so you can look at them more closely on your own. And you can find other examples with a simple Google search. Just simply go to Google, type in some topic that's relevant to what you know about. Computers, video games, electrical engineering, electromechanical devices, computer software, computer programming languages. But type that into Google and use a modifier like file type :PDF. And that way, not only will you find instruction manuals that are like web pages without that modifier, but by adding file type :PDF altogether, that'll bring up instruction manuals that are in PDF format related to what it is you're searching for. And then you can pull them up as I pull these up for us to look at in class today. Now, I'm also going to give you links to some examples on my blog that I've made. And these instruction manuals aren't necessarily as detailed as what you're going to be producing for our class, but I give these to you as examples of how to document your steps in your instruction manual and how to do that using your own photographs or your own illustrations. So this will be one that I show you about how to assemble a skateboard. And so here you can see the finished product of this reissued McGill skateboard from Pal Peralta that just came as a plank of wood, and then I did everything else to it. So after a little bit of explaining why I wanted to build it and some images of that in the skateboarding film, The Search for Animal Chin, I then lay out the parts. So here's the board as it's taken out of the packaging. There's nothing attached, no grip tape. Then I show a picture of everything together that you need. You have the skateboard, you have the trucks, wheels, hardware, tail, tailbone, you have risers, bearings, and then grip tape. I show some close-ups of the trucks, the wheels. Then I begin the actual construction. So I first want to drill my holes for the tailbone. I show how to do that using clamps, using my drill, how to support it, make it easier for drilling accurately. I show which drill bit size I'm actually going to be using. So I have my pilot holes and I drill the larger holes. Then I'm going to apply my grip tape. So I got the board down flat. I show how to score the edges before I cut the excess off. So I got this nice line all the way around. And then I cut that on that line using just a straight razor. And then I sand that edge using a little piece of leftover grip tape. This is basically like, just sandpaper with adhesive on the back. Then attach the tailbone, etc. So I'm going to give you this as a link to look through, but all these photos I just took myself as I was building the skateboard, thinking of each individual step as I was moving through. It's not perfect, but I think it should give you some ideas about how to plan ahead for what you want to illustrate in your instructions. Now, one thing that's come up before is I've had a number of students say they want to create instructions for building a computer, but they may not have all the equipment to build a new computer. They only have their computer that's running right at that moment. I don't want anybody to disassemble their computer and run the risk of damaging something just for the project in this class. But what you can do is some of your images in your instructions might be of your finished computer, right? Showing what the computer looks like when it's finished, showing maybe a picture of the back of the computer. But then for all the components inside, you can then draw them, sketch them by hand on paper, or sketch them using Google Drawing or different illustration software. But again, every image that goes into that instruction manual, you have to make. So don't rely on anything that you find in a Google image search. You can't use product images that are on Amazon or other Newegg or any other place. You are responsible for the images. But I don't expect you to have to take your computer apart and take photographs. Take photos of what you can, but then draw the other parts. That's totally fine. Again, it's not an art contest. Just convey things accurately with what you're illustrating. This next example that I'll give you a link to is a sparring lightsaber that I built using parts that I acquired at Home Depot. And again, I give context for why I'm making it in this case, for my cousin Ryan. He's a martial arts enthusiast. Here he is training on Wudang Mountain in China, training with their type of kung fu. And I wanted to make this thing for him, so that because I knew he liked Star Wars, but also wanted to make something that was strong enough that he could train with it like he would a real practice sword. And so again, I show the parts that I acquired to build it with. I list all the parts that I'm using, how it generally goes together, and then other parts that I use that I didn't have to buy at Home Depot because I already had them on hand, like dowel rod, JB weld, etc. Then I show step by step how I assemble things. So I use these channel lock pliers to tighten all the connections on the hilt, the handle of the lightsaber. How I built a grip using just nylon rope. How I used a special type of knot to hide the end of the rope on the grip. Because I wasn't making something necessarily professional, I included a picture of Mose helping me. But you can see each thing is step by step, and between each of the pictures I'm explaining it, what I'm doing, what's going on at that step. how to create like, one head of the hilt that looks like, it's a piece of technology. I use like a hard drive motor assembly for that I'd taken apart, and then creating a new removable head for the hilt that included the business end, the actual lightsaber made out of a dowel rod that I painted. Painting it, mistakes that I made, I included that in my steps to warn people about that, especially if you're using the wrong kind of paint for your primer. Starting over. You see, this is when I lived in Atlanta. I had my workshop in my garage, which unfortunately I don't have here in New York. There's not enough space, unfortunately. But then I finally got it like a finished product with the blade, and then attached that to the lightsaber hilt. And that gave Ryan something they could actually practice with when he was fighting with others. And then later, Ryan changed the wrapping using a different type of twine that gave a much cooler effect to his lightsaber. And then I gave an update on a different type of lightsaber that I built before I moved to New York. So I mean, a lot of different things that you can do with this, but again, you try to document as best you can using what you have at hand to work with. And then the final set of instructions I want to show you is for a cardboard computer that I built using a Raspberry Pi and a touchscreen. And so here is my desk at work at CityTech in the NAM building. And once we reopen NAM and we're all back on NAM, please stop by and see me sometime. I'm in NAM 520. But right now, because of the virus and everything, I'm usually not on campus. But you can see my desk here. This is the finished product. I used a Suntory shipping box as the housing for my computer. But again, I showed all the parts that I'm using. I have the Raspberry Pi, I got the 7-inch touchscreen, I have a mono speaker, I have an external battery pack that I use to power it. I showed all the parts that came with the Raspberry Pi kit that I bought, including the wireless keyboard and touchpad. I showed the Raspberry Pi before I started assembling everything. I showed you inserting the micro SD card that you install your operating system on. I set it up first using a television connected to the HDMI connector so I can install Raspbian. I showed all the steps on that. And again, I'm just using my camera phone to take photos of the TV screen. So again, very low-tech solution to screenshots, right? But when I was doing this, installing this actively on a television, using the TV as a monitor, I didn't have any way to make more professional-looking screenshots. So you work with what you can do. But if you're doing something like with software on a computer, like say you want to make an instruction manual for how to use Blender or how to use some type of compiler, then you can make really good screenshots on your own using the screenshot tools that are built into your operating system to capture just the window or to capture your desktop, whatever's relevant for the steps that you're trying to show. After setting up Raspbian, then I showed the assembly with the 7-inch touchscreen. So I got the driver board installed on the touchscreen, put the riser bolts on, then I can connect the data ribbon to the driver board. I attach the Raspberry Pi on top, connect the data cable over. Then I need to attach power to the right contacts on the header of the Raspberry Pi. Completed assembly. And then I go through the steps of setting up the touchscreen. You can see here is Moe's and our dearly departed Meow helping me out, staying warm while I'm working. And then I show like how I cut out the form for the box so that the touchscreen would sit into that, but be caught by just enough border to hold the Raspberry Pi in place. And then some final write-up of how I would use that. And I've used that in classes before and some presentations at City Tech. So again, these are all just meant to give you some ideas about how to be thinking about your instruction manual, how to document the different steps. But the key thing to focus on right now is to think about different topics that you can choose for your instruction manual. What processes, what task can you show someone how to accomplish that's relevant to what you're learning in your major or what you plan to be doing once you graduate from City Tech? So you want to focus on things that are relevant again. Something involving computers, something involving networking. It can involve hardware. It could be about software. But again, pick something that's relevant. And it needs to be something that you can think about how to make on your own. It doesn't have to be so extensive that it would be a project that would require you a year to do. Again, it's only 1,500 to 2,000 words, which I know sounds like a lot. But once you get into developing the steps for whatever process you want to show someone how to do, a task that you want to show them how to complete, you will find that a lot of writing will just come naturally. The main thing right now is to figure out what task, what process do you want to show people how to do. So that brings us to this week's homework and weekly writing assignment. So again, the homework is peer review on the expanded definition essay. Put together your two parts that you've already worked on into a single document. Watch for the reply all email, read the instructions, but basically I want you to copy and paste your expanded definition memo into the reply all email that you send to all your teammates and to me, and then you're going to make your ask and offer, that you're asking for feedback on your work and you're offering to give feedback to your other teammates on their work. Again, copy and paste your writing into the reply all email. Don't attach documents at this point. Don't link to your writing wherever else it might be. Let's keep things simple. Make it easy for your teammates to read your work and be able to reply with some feedback. And again, the goal for feedback, you want to try to give people at least 250 words of feedback. What works, what doesn't work, is there problems, are things missing, and then find something concrete in their writing that you quote and then rewrite in your own words to give them an example of how maybe they can improve and revise their expanded definition project before they submit it to me for a grade. So that's the homework. The weekly writing assignment, I want you to write a brief memo addressed to me. Subject can be, planning for the instruction project. And what I want you to do is discuss the pros and cons of 3 possible instruction manuals that you could write. Now, each instruction manual would be about a different thing and a different task, right? So like you could make an instruction manual on how to build a computer, instruction manual on how to install an operating system, instruction manual on how to use Blender, how to use the GIMP, how to use LibreOffice, how to use OBS like I'm using right now. So it can be about a lot of different things. You'd be like how to construct a small computer network, how to construct a small wireless computer network, how to construct a mesh wireless network, how to create a routing table for Cisco routers. There are endless possibilities, but again, it needs to be relevant. It needs to be of a technical nature related to your major and what your career is going to be. So think of 3 possibilities. discuss what are the pros and cons of each. Pros can be like, you have the equipment on hand, or you have that software installed, or you have all the wiring for, like, say, something network oriented. But the cons might be, well, it might take time to make, or you don't have the equipment, or it'd be hard for you to take photographs or to take screenshots, or whatever it might be. But discuss that, and then tell me at the end of the memo which of your 3 options you choose and why you've chosen it. Like, what was the prevailing thing that made you say, instead of these 2 other options, this is the one that I'm going to pick. Again, it needs to be a unique instruction manual that you haven't worked on before. It has to be something unique and new for our class. All the images, illustrations have to be made by you. The writing has to be yours, but you may quote and cite sources outside. It could be from the library, it could be from websites. But again, you need to always write as much or more than the quote to explain why it's there, what it means. And we're going to talk in future lectures about how to start putting all this together. But the first step is to make sure you think about and then decide on a good topic for your instruction manual. What do you want to show someone how to do? And you get to choose the topic, you get to choose your audience, and then you're going to be writing that instruction manual based on those selections. So I'll get this posted for Wednesday. Watch for that reply all email for peer review on the expanded definition essay. And again, if you got plenty of time to work on the homework, so if you're not quite ready to send around your expanded definition for peer review, go ahead and knock out the weekly writing assignment, and then turn your attention back to the expanded definition project, so you get a draft of that done, and then can reply all with the text of your expanded definition in the email and your ask and offer. Okay? So if anybody's got questions, remember you can email me, jellis@citytech.cuny.edu, and you can also come to my office hours on Wednesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. on Google Hangouts. The link is on our Open Lab site on the left and at the top of our syllabus. So again, everybody be healthy, be safe out there, mask up, eat well, get plenty of sleep. Sleep's really good for your immune systems. And you try to prioritize your schoolwork as much as possible, but I know that you are all juggling a lot of different things. If something tries to derail your success in our class, talk to me. Let me know what's going on, and maybe we can work things out. I don't want you just to withdraw from the class before talking to me, because maybe we can find a way forward, a new way to make it happen, as long as everything in the syllabus is being accomplished, that you're working with your team, you're doing the work, but we can adjust things to try to keep everybody on track. Okay? So good luck, and I'll be talking with you all real soon.